Hey y'all, Irix Guy here, and I am the drone evangelist. So before I continue, I want to remind everyone, always practice safe and responsible drone use. And don't just practice safe and responsible drone use, preach it. Be your own fellow drone evangelist. Practice and preach safe and responsible drone use. Because if we don't, this hobby may cease to exist. With that being said, I want to go through step by step the things that everyone should do prior to their first flight with the DJI Mini 4 Pro. Now, I've been flying drones since DJI Phantom 1. I was kind of a late adopter because Phantom 2 had come out and I was afraid to get into drones because I was afraid it would fly away and I'd never see it again. I was wrong. This hobby is super awesome. DJI drones have been super reliable and the technologies only continue to get better. So with that being said, I want to tell you what I do before my first DJI Mini 4 Pro flight. So the first thing you want to do, you need to understand drone safety. You need to understand in your country, do you have to register the drone? You know, check with your local country, see what the regulations may be. Obviously, make sure before your first flight that you're in a flying location that is permissible. You can't fly a drone just anywhere. So, you know, those are some common sense. Do your own due diligence. If you have questions, you know, reach out to your local government and find out, you know, what parameters you have to fall within to be able to enjoy the hobby. With that being said, I'm going to get into the meat and potatoes here. So the first thing before you even go to the field or wherever you're going to be flying, the first thing to do is to download the DJI Fly app to your iPhone or your Android device to make sure that you have the correct cable. Now, if you're using an iPhone, some of the iPhones are the Lightning style cable, but some of the iPhones are now USB-C. So with your DJI Mini 4 Pro, it probably came with two cables. One is probably USB-C to USB-C. The other one is probably USB-C to Lightning. So make sure you've got the appropriate cable attached to your DJI Mini 4 Pro's controller. I've got the controller without the screen. You may have the controller that has the integrated screen. It doesn't matter. The cables, well, actually, it does matter because if you're using one with the screen, you don't need to attach your smartphone. So if you're using a controller like I use, where you do attach your smartphone, make sure you've got the appropriate cable attached. And you're going to discover if you do or you don't before heading to the field anyway, because you will have to download the latest firmware. So that's the next thing you're going to do after you install the DJI Fly app, after you've completed whatever questions may exist within the DJI Fly app to, you know, activate your drone or whatever. Then you'll get to the point where you download the firmware. It's super important that you download the latest firmware prior to heading to your safe and responsible flying location for the first time, because you want to make sure that the drone's firmware as well as the controller's firmware, and then also the app, the DJI Fly app, that all of those are the most currently available version, because you don't want to use anything that's obsolete. That could pose potential risk if you're using something that's outdated. I mean, there could have been a bug fix, you know, the list goes on. So it's always advantageous to make sure before you fly that you've got the latest and greatest firmware installed. And that's the case for future flights. You know, always before you go out and fly, when you're connected to your fast, you know, home or whatever Wi-Fi network, be sure to check for updates. Next thing you want to do, obviously, make sure your controller is completely charged, and make sure the battery or batteries for your DJI Mini 4 Pro are completely charged. The good thing about the Mini 4 Pro is that it uses USB-C to recharge. So most vehicles nowadays, and ATVs and boats and that sort of stuff, they typically have USB ports. So this is easy to charge and to recharge when you're heading from one flying location to the other. So that's a huge convenience. So make sure you're charged, make sure your firmware is updated, make sure your app's updated. Make sure your app's updated, and make sure where you're planning to fly is 100% permissible in the country that you're in, that you're not in violation of any sort of rules or regulations that might exist in your country at that particular flying location. So once you know everything checks out and you're ready to fly, you need to be aware of where you are. You know, you need to do a walk around. You need to look at it and say, okay, well, there's trees here, there's a tree there, there's a pond here, there's a pole here. You know, anything that could interfere with the drone while flying, or if you have to take a quick landing to avoid a potentially catastrophic outcome, you know, for your drone, crashing it into the ground or crashing it into a lake. You know, if there's water over here, one would obviously assume, hey, I should probably not fly over that water, or I shouldn't fly close to that water. You know, keep in mind that if you do have to, because you're learning how to fly, and these drones are pretty easy to fly, but everything requires practice. And so, you know, be aware of the location, the safe and responsible location where you plan to fly, because if there's a lake, don't fly by the lake, go somewhere else. And, you know, be aware of trees, be aware of power lines, something that people may not be aware of in certain locations. Even though a flying location may be a permissible location, there may be things that could potentially interfere. Now, although OcuSync, which is the communications technology that's built into the DJI Mini 4 Pro, seems to be rock solid, there's typically always something, whether it's a cell phone tower or, you know, some sort of plant that has antennas or something up, there's often things that can interfere with wireless communications, whether that's OcuSync, Wi-Fi, or, you know, anything for that matter. So be aware of things that are nearby that could potentially interfere with the flight controls and or the FPV, which is the first-person view. So that's something once you're in the field. Now, when you're in the field, obviously make sure that you inserted. Now, actually, you probably should have done this before you got to the field. Make sure you've got your micro SD card inserted, because the built-in storage in the Mini 4 Pro is next to nothing. You need to have a micro SD card. So make sure that was inserted. Make sure you formatted the DJI Mini 4 Pro micro SD card, and check out my separate video where I explain step by step how to format the DJI Mini 4 Pro's micro SD card. And then make sure that you've also selected within the DJI Fly app to use the SD card instead of the internal storage, because even though you've inserted the micro SD card and you formatted it, if you didn't set the SD card as your preferred recording option within the DJI Fly app for Mini 4 Pro, it'll probably try to record to the internal, and that's a problem because the internal storage is next to nothing. So it's going to exhaust itself, and you're not going to capture all the videos and photos that you plan to, if you're capturing videos and photos. And that leads to the next thing. Adjust your gimbal wheel speed. That's the speed of, you know, the camera up and the camera down. I like kind of a slower gimbal wheel speed because it gives it that better cinematic, low and slow type look. And you can subscribe and check out my separate video where I explain step by step how I set my gimbal wheel speed for my DJI Mini 4 Pro. So you want to make sure your gimbal wheel speed's set. You're going to want to make sure that your video settings are set. Again, check out my separate videos where I explain all of these techniques. But you want to, you know, I film in 4K 60. You may not want to film in 4K. And if you do, you may want to do 4K 30 frames per second. 4K 60 I like because if I retime the video, speed up and or slow down the footage within post-production, when I do that, I get better results with 60 frames per second than I do with 30 frames per second. But that's a matter of personal preference. So you do what you want to do. You know, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just sharing things that I do before I fly. So, yeah, your video settings, if you're taking still photos, make sure your camera settings for stills are the preferred options. I like to shoot in RAW so that I can color correct and better add updates to the images within post-production. But, you know, you may just want to shoot in JPEG. That's completely fine. You do what you want to do. Again, I'm not telling you what to do. This is just for entertainment purposes only. So once you've done that, you know, obviously check the weather. I mean, if it's raining, don't fly the drone. You don't want to get this thing wet. If it's super windy, don't fly the drone. You don't want to put the drone and or the, you know, the environment at risk. You know, maybe there's something in the field, the safe and responsible location where you are, and if this drone fell, it could damage it. You don't want to do that. You could be damaging something, and it'd be the act of your own stupidity because it was too windy to fly. So use common sense. I mean, don't be a fool. And that's the problem with this hobby. I mean, there's too many fools that are involved with this hobby, and it's making it rough for the responsible and you know, responsible drone hobbyists that enjoy this hobby and want to continue to see it evolve. So, you know, and obviously keep in mind before your first flight, when you've got your drone on the landing pad, is it facing away from you or is it facing towards you? Because depending upon the direction of flight, the controls will be reversed. So if you're flying towards you, it's opposite when you're using the controller than if it's flying away. So make yourself situationally aware. And what I would recommend doing starting out, I would just fly with the drone facing away from you. And once you get the feel for that, challenge yourself. Start off, take off with it facing towards you, and know that in your head, okay, everything's in reverse now than if I was staring at the rear of the drone. Now I'm staring at the front of the drone. It just takes practice, like most anything else. Riding a bicycle, playing a video game, field stripping a Glock. How many, maybe you haven't field stripped a Glock, but when you field strip a Glock, it's not the easiest thing to do the first time. But once you figured it out, it's like riding a bicycle. You'll never forget. So, things that you want to do, that's what you want to do. And obviously something that this should be common sense, but I'll state anyway, when the battery starts to get low, bring it down. Don't try to maximize your time in the field. Like I said, the DJI Mini 4 Pro is USB rechargeable. Charge it back up and then fly some more. You don't have to plug it into an electrical outlet like you did some of the older drones. So this has the convenience of USB recharge. You have a USB solar battery bank with you and recharge it in the field and top off that battery bank with the sun. Take extra batteries if you want to. If you're going to be flying for a long time, take extra batteries. The flight time of this is amazing though. We're easily over 30 minutes, easily, even in suboptimal conditions. But yeah, just things that people should be aware of. And it's not a difficult hobby to enjoy, but make sure that everything is up to date. Make sure you're in a safe and responsible location. Make sure that you know the insides and outs of that drone from a safety perspective. Make sure you've got your home point set, because what if, and obviously always fly line of sight to be safe and responsible. But what if something goes wrong with the drone that's beyond your control, you didn't plan for it, and it triggers, let's say there's some sort of bug. Hopefully there's not. DJI is super reliable from my experience, but any sort of computer, any piece of technology is prone to failure. So what if something happens and it has to return home? It's important to make sure that that home point was properly set, because if it tries to return home and it's going to what it thinks is the home point and is not the home point, that could result in a catastrophic outcome for the drone, and we wouldn't want that. So these are just a few pointers, and I probably didn't cover everything. So I know there's people that are watching this video that are smarter than I am. So comment below and share your thoughts. This is here to be entertaining and potentially informative, but I just like to have fun with this. I'm not here to make drones something overly complicated, and I'm not trying to deter people, to deter hobbyists from enjoying the hobby. It's an excellent hobby. And with that being said, as a reminder, always practice, but don't just practice drone safety, preach drone safety. I am the drone evangelist, but you be a fellow drone evangelist and practice and preach safe and responsible drone use. Because if we don't, this hobby may cease to exist. And any questions that you have, comment below, because I'll try my best to post a video response. I really enjoy drones. Like I said, I've been flying drones since DJI Phantom 1, and I'm trying to just spread a positive message about the drone hobby, because if we don't, this hobby may cease to exist. Thanks for your viewership. Be sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and check out all of my other drone videos too. Y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, Captain Irix Guy here. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to subscribe. It's youtube.com/Irix Guy. And ring that bell icon when you do to be notified whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.